So everyone, welcome to Richard Carlton and the Calvin Show, where we're starting hour number 3 or whatever we're doing. This is FM Training.tv, where today we've already had awesome certification training, and if you missed it, you're probably crying in your beer right now. We apologize for that. Yeah, only our highly valued complete bundle subscribers get access to the complete training. So let's talk about the upcoming broadcast schedule. All right, upcoming broadcast schedule today is script trigger overview. Calvin will be talking about script triggers and how they come up, and probably vaguely how they might be used on a test if you get so inclined to go down that road. Tomorrow's merge field overview review. Once again, these are topics that during our certification training kind of came up as stuff we hadn't hit in a while. Then Friday, I've got to remind Jacob Taylor, Margaret, remind Jacob Taylor, he's going to be with me discussing FileMaker server shenanigans. It's kind of an open Q&A, so if you have a FileMaker server or you have questions about that stuff, that'll be a good one for Friday. The next week is kind of like up in the air because we're still trying to get the certification training done. Calvin, you're up to bat, baby. Try not to let me down.
All right. Well, we're going to look at some script triggers. So one of the big things that we want to focus on the script triggers is the order that they happen. So I'm going to open up my demo file, and every time a script trigger goes off, we will get a notification saying what script trigger just went off. So I just opened the file, and everybody will get this file if you'd like to download it. First one is the on first window open. So you can have script triggers specifically for the file. And before we had script triggers, we had an option to run a script when the file started, and that was the startup script, we often called it. Now we call it the on first window open script. And so I'm going to say OK. And now I have a file specific script on window open. So you can have an on window open script that's set to the file or to the layout. I'll say OK. Now we have a layout on layout enter trigger. So this is a layout specific trigger, and that just ran. I'll say OK. Now we have a mode trigger based on the layout on mode enter, and we're in browse mode. I'll say OK. And now we have the layout on record load, and now on layout size change. Interestingly, we haven't changed the size. This is the size it is, but it still ran. I'll say OK. And that was it. We had how many triggers just went off just to get to the first screen? And now we have on mode exit, on layout exit, on window close, on last window close, and close it. Okay, so I'm going to count these as we open it. So 1, on first window open. 2, on window open. 3, on layout enter. 4, on mode enter. 5, on record load. 6, on layout size change, just to open up the first one. So let's go ahead and look at where these are defined. So first of all, we'll go to File, and then File Options. And under the script triggers, we have a number of script triggers. On first window open, on last window close, on window open, that's anytime a new window is opened, on window close, anytime a window is closed. And then we have on file AV player change. Now the on file AV player change trigger is only runs on iOS. And I don't have a device set up to demo this today, but that's where that would come into place. Okay, so let's go ahead and just make some observations about this. I'm going to enter a field. So there's an object trigger, and I just selected the delete, and we have a layout keystroke on object modify. Let's go ahead and look at how the layout triggers are set up. And I'll go to edit. So even when I select edit, I'm getting an on object validate because the record's active. I made a change. On object save, that's saving the field. On object exit, exiting the field. On record commit, because I have to commit the record before we go into layout mode. On mode exit, we're leaving browse mode and going into layout mode. Okay, let's go ahead and select the layout setup. In here, the last option is script triggers. So we've got on record load, on record commit, on record revert, on layout keystroke, layout enter, exit, size change, mode enter, mode exit, view change, on gesture tap, and on external command received. So that's where all of those are defined. I'm going to go ahead and show where the object ones are defined as well. So here's the object triggers. I had to right click on the object and open up the triggers and select script triggers. And it gave me the options, and they're all assigned to the different scripts. You can have script triggers based on a field. You can have script triggers based on a tab, and tabs also have the on-panel switch option, which was grayed out if you noticed over here. Script triggers for the field, on-panel switch is grayed out because it's not really applicable. We have a text here, and you'll notice this is just a text object, and there's no script trigger option. You can't bring up the options. Here's a button. I'll select script triggers, and all of these same script triggers, usually when we think of enter and exit and save, we're thinking of fields, but all of those same triggers are available to us in a button as well. Let's go, we'll exit that. Here we have a popover. So this is a button set up as a popover, script triggers, all the same script triggers that we have for the fields. And even in the popover itself, select the script triggers. We've got all those same options available to us in the popover. So let's go ahead and go to browse mode. And now we have an on mode enter, layout on record load, and here we're back. So I'm going to select the container, on object enter, say OK. And so the tab order in here is to tab, actually let's go out of there. And I'm just going to select tab to start my tab order. Now on layout keystroke, you'll notice it hasn't tabbed yet. That's a pre-trigger. So this happens before it processes my keystroke. I'll say OK. Now it processes my keystroke, and I have this on object enter that's assigned to the tab itself. I'll say OK. Now I can tab to the next item. So on layout keystroke, there's our layout trigger. On layout keystroke, on object exit, we're exiting the tab. On object enter, we're entering the field. And that was the last one. I'm going to do shift tab to go back to that first tab that we looked at. On object keystroke, so there's the object keystroke, and then there's the layout keystroke. We had two keystroke triggers going at the same time. One's for the object, one for the layout. On object exit for the field, and on object enter going back to the tab, and now it's closed. Now I'm going to arrow right, and so layout on layout keystroke, so that's the layout keystroke. On layout keystroke, I think one's an object keystroke and one's a layout keystroke. That might be mislabeled. So now you'll see tab 2 is highlighted. If I select return, I'm going to get this again, layout keystroke, one's an object keystroke. And then we have on panel switch. So we're switching from panel 1 to panel 2. And on object modify. Now usually I think of modify as being like changing a field, but this is actually, you're modifying the tab by navigating from one to another. And we're back into this tab. Let's go over here. I'm just going to clear through these. And what I wanted to show is tabbing into a button. So I'm going to tab into a button. On object exit, I'm exiting the container field. I'm on object enter, I'm entering the button. And I've got the in focus format to show us where we are. And so now I'm in that button. I can select return to activate the button. I've got an on object keystroke, on layout keystroke, and then the button script. This is the only script in this app that is not a trigger, and that was just run from the, it's just associated with that button. So we ran that. I'm going to tab to the next object, which is the popover. You get all of these exiting and entering keystrokes. I'm going to do an enter for this one. And what's interesting, you'll notice that the button stayed in focus even after we performed the script. But if I do enter on the popover, we get an on object keystroke, on layout keystroke, on object exit. So we're exiting the button popover, and we're entering the popover itself. Now we have an on object enter trigger that's giving us this dialog. And that's really an overview of all of these different options that we have for triggers. And in this case, all we're doing is seeing when they happen and really getting that order, what order they happen in, which is good to know. Usually you don't use all of them all at the same time like we're doing here, but often you can have a bunch of triggers popping up, and you can see those in the script debugger. Now this demo, let's go ahead and I'm going to so I clicked on the layout. We're getting the on object exit from the popover. And I'm going to go change the view to a list. Okay. So we have a on view change trigger. And I'm going to scroll down and select, now we're in a list view. I'll select the next record. And now we have on record load. When you're in a list view, you can see multiple records, but not until you select it does the on record load trigger happen. So we can jump back and forth between these. Let's go ahead and change the table view, see what happens. We have an on view change for the layout, and that was the only trigger there. Let's go back to form. Do we have any questions at this point?
We do. We've got two. Okay.
Okay.
So the first one is from Oregon Dean. Great visual approach and makes it very clear what the trigger sequence is. Does that order match the dialog box, or do we need to commit to memory?
The dialog box?
I think he's talking about like when you have, is there an option to like select script triggers? Is it in order?
Yeah, so let's go, so a dialog box, just to clarify, usually this is what we call a custom dialog. Maybe he's talking about the script trigger options here. And this script trigger option is actually in order. So this on object enter, then keystroke, modify, validate, save, exit. And so that would be your order. But what's not present here is this is just the object triggers. So to get really how they all work together, we've got file triggers, layout triggers, object triggers. And so what this file is trying to show you is how those integrate, how those go together, because we have a keystroke. I'm going to go ahead and just type something. So we have a object keystroke, and we have a layout keystroke. So one is, and then we're modifying the record. So there's two different keystrokes there, but they happen in a specific order based on whether it's a layout keystroke or an object keystroke, and those would be used in different scenarios. We do have this option up here to open up the trigger setup. So setting up script triggers, and here is the object triggers and our layout triggers, our file options, and then the timing of those triggers, which is helpful to know. But so each of our triggers are what we can call before process or after process. So you'll notice I'm going to go back over here on object enter, okay? And I'm going to type in a backspace, a delete in there. And we'll look at how this corresponds with, we have an on layout size change, how this corresponds with here. So delete. Now you'll notice that A is still there. It hasn't run the delete yet. This on object keystroke ran before the process, before that keystroke, before that deletion was made. I'll say okay. Now the layout keystroke, that's down here. On layout keystroke, that ran before the process. And before that ran. So I'll say, okay. Now you'll see the A's gone, it deleted. Now we have the on object modify. So you'll see on object modify, it happens afterwards. So the deletion happened, and then the modification happened. I'll say okay, and that was it. Now if I go up here to records and say revert record, it's giving me a warning. I'm going to say okay. Now I have an on object exit, so I'm leaving the field. On record revert, so we reverted it back, and so we're back where we started. Was that the right dialogue that we were looking for?
Yes, he did say the set trigger box. So.
Oh, okay.
Right after the fact, so I think we're good. And then let me know if that answers your question, Oregon Dean. And then the next one after that is from Stu. How do you trigger on object validate or save on a popover button / slide, etc.?
So on object validate is an object trigger. So let's go ahead and over here. And so I'm going to go into layout mode and we'll look at this popover. Look at our script triggers. So we do have an on object validate trigger option. I'm not sure how that would work on a popover, but usually what we'll see in a popover is if we want to validate something, I'll just put a field in here, and if I want this to have a value in it in a popover, and I want to force them to be in the popover, we can put a button in here. So I'll go ahead and put a button, and done. Oops, done. I'll do, we'll say perform script. We'll do a new script, and we'll say close popover.
Yeah, okay.
What's that?
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I did not realize. Go ahead. Keep going.
So so if we do close popover, it is I'm going to say exit script, and we're going to call this if or not is empty field. Okay, so what this will do is, and this will be we'll call this an on object. Oops. I'm going to call this popover script trigger on object exit. So all it is a single step with to check if that field is open or not, or is this done or not. So I'm going to just update my script trigger and do this on object exit. Select this one. And this button here is just going to do a single step and will be close popover. Okay. So this isn't exact. This is the purpose of this is a validation of sorts, making sure that value has something in it. I'll say done, and now you notice I can't get out of there, and that's because the result is false. So when I go over here and say all I'm doing is exiting the script, all it's doing is doing this exit script, but it's saying is empty the field, and if it's empty, then we will get a 0 result. Empty will cancel the trigger. So I'm going to type in here and do type in a 4, and there I saved it. Now when I say done, it closes. So on object enter, it's going back to that popover. I'm not sure that is exactly the kind of validation that we were looking at, but that's how I would normally do a validation on a popover to make sure that there's a value in it. Does that answer the question?
Stu, does that answer your question?
Any other questions?
We do, yes. Beyond
Okay,
me
go ahead.
accidentally cackling like a witch in the background because of Richard.
Ha.
David Angel, how to stop on object keystroke before continue to on layout keystroke. The idea is to stop going to next record in a drop down value list.
Can you say that one more time?
I'm going to also at you with it in Discord. If you have that open, I don't know if you do. From David Angel.
Okay. How to stop an on-object keystroke before continue to on-layout keystroke. The idea is to stop going to the next record in a drop-down value list. I'm not exactly sure what we mean by the next record in a drop-down value list. Do you have a popover with a portal?
So basically, David Angel, can you clarify, please?
Yeah, so usually one thing that we like to do with the on layout keystroke, and Nick does this in his, actually I have Nick's file open here. I was using this earlier today for something, but he likes having this on layout keystroke. So if we go into layout mode here and check out our script triggers, we have an on layout keystroke running this record navigation. So I'm going to go to browse mode. And if I do an arrow up or any and if I type anything on this layout, it will run. But what I'm doing here is doing an arrow up. And in that case, he's trapping for the arrow up. And here's our arrow up. And he's trapping to see if I'm holding down the Alt to see if I should go, if it should go to the first record or just the previous. And then it goes to the previous record. And so this is one way that you can use the first time I saw on layout keystroke triggers, I thought, this is ridiculous. Why would I ever want to have a script run every time you type something? But in a system like this, where we can navigate with an arrow up and down, it makes it really fast for navigating through records. And I've gotten to a point where I've been putting this in so many of the apps that I work on. Now I'm used to that working. I expect it to work and go up and down. I'm not exactly sure that I think it might be what is it? I'm not sure if that's the use case that is in the question, but that's kind of a use case where you might use the on layout keystroke. On object keystroke is a little different because it's limited to one field. And so you might put it in to handle whether the keystroke is maybe a number or not. So you could force a phone field to only have numbers, or some field only have text, or something like that. You could trap for backspaces so that people don't delete things and such like that. Was there any follow-up to that question or any other questions?
We kind of have a sort of follow-up to Stu. Which is, Stu basically said he's more curious if like that on object validate is ever helpful, because he said indirectly my takeaway is that on object validate is not a useful trigger for a popover. On object exit is useful to run a validate script, however.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So that's a good point, because I'm not sure if, let's open up the popover. And we got on object enter. We can do whatever we want. I can close it. On object enter. We didn't get an on object exit. Oh, because I changed the on object exit trigger. So so we're not really getting an on object validate. I'm not sure how that would. And now that we're talking about this on a popover, I'm not sure how that would be triggered. I'd be really curious if someone's ever done it. Because validation, in my mind, is specific to record data. So the on-object modify kind of makes sense if, in the case of we're changing something, like on-object modify comes up with the tabs and panels. OnObject save I don't think does, but these are valid options in the triggers. I'm not sure how we would get those to register though. Obviously they do if you look at a field and we type in something here. We have our keystroke triggers, we have our modification triggers, and when we click out, we've got an OnObject validate. So that it's actually, let's go ahead and select OnObject validate. See what happens here. See what our options are. So performs a script before an active object has been validated and saved, before the event has been processed. It works in browse and find mode. You can use the exit script step within the trigger to return true or false. True, the event that triggered the script proceeds. False, the event that triggered the script cancels. It works Pro, Go, WebDirect, Server, Cloud, Data API, Web Publishing. Great. It's from FileMaker 11. The script trigger activates only when the selected field data has been changed. See actions that don't activate triggers. Let's see that. And let's just see if there's a popover. And I'm not saying popover didn't come up here. So we could read through this and see the different options that don't activate triggers. But here in the notes, it specifically says that it's for field data. So I'm wondering if there is a way to even trigger the data for an object like a popover. But usually we use it in relation to a field. Any follow-up or other questions?
Stu just mentioned that OnObject validate on popover may be useful in find mode.
Yeah, let's try. I don't think I have any of these popover, these applied in find mode. So I'm going to go back to browse mode. Got it. Mode, exit, enter. Okay. Any other questions?
We had a bit of a follow-up to the David Angel one from earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I do see yours, Ruben. I'll get to yours after we finish up the David follow-up. If you're in a drop-down list and you press down, we'll quit the selection drop-down list and go to the next record, and validating the option of up-down arrow key in the value list selection.
Yeah, I'm not sure I followed that exactly, but so we got a drop-down list, and let's just create a new list.
If you're in a drop-down list and you press down, it will quit the selection drop-down list. Like, I assume you press the down key.
For the keystroke?
Yeah.
So if I go arrow down, so when I'm doing arrow down, it's not actually running the keystroke, which is interesting.
That might be what he's asking about then.
Yeah, so if I select a field, so I selected that field, and I hit escape to open the drop-down list, and obviously these dialog boxes are messing things up. I arrow up and down, it doesn't do anything. That's really interesting that trigger doesn't do anything. But I guess it sees that as selection within the value list, the drop-down list, not as keystrokes.
Yeah, in his case, it's running the keystroke and goes to the next record before he can actually select. Interesting.
Yes. Well, let's try it as a popover. Did he say that was a drop-down list or a popover?
He said it was a drop-down list.
Oh, that's a drop-down list. I'm sorry, pop-up menu. Yeah, so I'm not getting either of those behaviors. That's really interesting. One thing that you'll want, that if you do that, use the trigger that Nick has here, you'll notice that if there is an active field that exits. So it only runs if you're not entering data. And so it exits there and lets you keep entering data. So if I go over here and type in, let's create a new record, and I say Command A, and I'm typing something, it's going to run this script each time I type a letter. And when you're typing, you don't really notice it because it's exiting right away. Even if I go arrow up, arrow down, you'll see I'm going to the beginning in front of that field, but I'm not going up and down in the records because it's exiting. Now that there's no field active, I can go up and down. So that would be, you'd want some kind of exit to and check to make sure that you are not in an active, there's no active field when you're doing that and selection. Any follow-up question to that?
David Angel gave a thumbs up and said on active field should do it.
Okay, great.
We do have another question.
Go ahead.
Question from Ruben. On object modify is after the process. But when I use the on object modify on a field and I send the same field as a script parameter to a script, then the script gets the field contents of the field before modifying. How does that work?
Interesting. So the trigger that you want to use is on object save. On object save gives you what's in that field. And the other thing about on object saved is that you can do all these modifications to the field and it won't make that it won't trigger until you've exited. So, but to his point, let's go ahead and see what happens if we go over here, and I'm going to go conditional, not conditional formatting, script triggers, and on object modify, and we're going to change, this is an object trigger, and we're going to say get active field contents. And let's go ahead and edit this and show dialog. And we're going to go add a return and get script parameter. Okay. Let's go ahead and see what this does. So we're going to enter in here. And I'm going to go ahead and type a letter. So we have our trigger keystroke, our layout keystroke, our on object modify, and it got the C, which was the previous value. And okay, so now let's try that again. I'll delete the on object keystroke, on layout keystroke, object modify. Now we see CA. And I think that the reason why we're getting that is that the trigger might run after, but we're getting the script parameter is set before. I think that's the difference. And so let's go ahead and see what happens with our on object save. If we go over here, on object save, and we're saying get script parameter, okay. Go to layout mode, script triggers, and on object save is the one, I'm going to say get active field contents. Object save is the one that we use for our audit log. And that's one of the key ones that is used there. So now I say type something else. Okay, so there we have CAL, and now I'm going to tab to the next thing. We've got object keystroke, layout keystroke, object validate, object save. And so on that object save, we actually get the value in there that we last put in. And now we're exiting, now we're entering somewhere else. So on object save would be what you want if you want to include whatever you currently have in the field. Any follow-up to that or other questions?
From Ruben, on object save, gotcha. But how to work with the radio button change? You first have to leave the radio button?
We could try a radio button. Let's try it. So I'm going to just move this down and call this one radio. And we're going to say radio button set. We've got that. Let's just do another radio, alternate radio. We'll just leave it that way. Okay, here's our radio. And I click on A. We've got on object enter, on object modify, on object validate, on object save A. So here on object modify, so we're already in the field. On object validate, on object save. So it's saving it as soon as you make that change in the radio button. Does that answer the question? That's a little interesting. Some of those drop-down lists and popovers and such behave a little differently than you might expect at first.
You got okay, cool, thanks from Ruben. So.
Cool.
I don't see any other questions. We have any questions, YouTube, Twitch? Y'all good?
So this is we're not implementing any exciting features per se, but what this file is intended to do is kind of help us understand how the triggers work and how they can, and particularly the order in which they happen, and the different ways that we can trigger them. One of the interesting things that I was didn't expect was how the enter and exit triggers work even with popovers and buttons. And as I'm working on these different apps where we try to keep the navigation to the keyboard, that really kind of comes into play in kind of tracking where we're going and making sure the person stays in the tab order somewhere and something stays active. But I hope you find this demo interesting and helpful, and glad you joined it with us today.
No, I think it's awesome. Honestly, Calvin, this is great. Thank you so much. This has been really cool, especially learning the order of this. It's all fun. Yeah, these sorts of how-tos are very helpful. I'm going to second Organ Dean strongly on that one. Yeah, thanks, Calvin. I wish I would have had the sample file back when I was first getting started.
Yeah.
We all. I think I'm going to call it here for today. Thank you so much again, Calvin. You are the best. And I'm going to hit
Thank you.
Thing.
We'll see you, Margaret.
Bye.
Of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.